All right, so today we're going to review APIs and web scraping. I'm going to go over some really common examples of which you can extrapolate methodologies from for your own APIs or your own websites that you want to scrape. So as a quick overview, I'm going to be going over 5 different ways of getting data from 5 different sources, 2 different ways of getting data from 5 sources. So first we have one called Twint, that's for tweets. If you've seen any of the previous projects, pretty much anything that uses tweet data came from this library called Twint. We're going to take a look at Spotipy for Spotify data. We're going to take a look at one called PRAW for Reddit data. These 2 are actually Python wrappers, and I'll go into what those are in a little bit. Next, we'll talk about web scraping. So I have 2 examples here. So I didn't mean to open this. But first we have scraping XML from Board Game Geek. I'll talk in more detail about what XML is. And then finally, we'll scrape some apartments from Craigslist as an example as well. All right. Feel free if either of you have APIs or websites that you're thinking of scraping and can't figure it out, feel free to send it to me. Maybe we can figure it out during an office hours together. All right, so let's start with Twint. So Twint is also a Python wrapper. Interesting. Basically, Python wrappers are libraries that have built-in methods that call on the API for you. Because sometimes if you make direct API calls, an example of API calls we saw like the New York Times API was one that we worked with months ago at this point. Can be kind of complicated because if you remember with that one, we had to like use a specific URL. We had to put the string together a specific way. So Python wrappers actually make it a little bit easier because they have built-in methods and attributes that we can use from the library. And we'll take a look at some examples, and I feel like that'll sink in. But so Twint is the one that is for Twitter, if we're getting tweets. So to start, we're going to import Twint, import pandas as well. If these imports don't work, as usual, you can pip install Twint, and the same goes for any of the other ones that we're going to talk about later. So first, import Twint pandas. This Nest async IO, I actually don't know what that is for either. I will say that Twint recently, because Twitter has actually gone through a lot of changes since the beginning of the year with like its privacy settings, its blocking settings, because I think of like, what happened at the start of the year. It's become a little finicky, I will say. And I found that just importing this and applying this, I'm going to be honest, I don't know what that is. But just importing this gets Twint to work correctly, because I took some of my old code from last year even, and it did not work without this. So just letting you all know, if you're using Twint, don't forget to just add that in. So let's run this cell real quick. And for Twint, it's kind of like object-oriented programming, if anyone remembers what that's like. But you basically have to define a bunch of attributes, and then you do a search.
So just one quick question.
Yeah.
Is there any alternative to Twint?
There are a couple. There is one called there is a Twitter API. The Twitter API has recently been very, very hard to get access to because of Twitter's new things that are going on with Twitter. They've made their API very, very difficult to access. So Twint actually in the backend, what they're doing is they're actually really quickly scraping tweets off of Twitter. But Twint is, I think, currently the best way to get tweets. I'll talk about some limitations in a little bit, but I do think that Twint is the best way. And with this this line, it works fine.
Okay.
All right. So as I was saying, kind of works like object-oriented programming. If you don't remember what that is, that's fine. We're just going to define a bunch of attributes to do a search. So I'm going to separate this out. The first thing you got to do is configure your Twint object. And I'm just going to call it C for config. So this is where I define a bunch of attributes. If you go onto Twint's website, or onto their documentation, I should say, you can see that there are a lot of different attributes that you can search for. So let me see, where is a quick way that you can see. Where is this here? So this is an example. And then if you go to, where's the specific part? They've also recently changed Twint's documentation. So I get a little bit lost, but basically there's somewhere, I'll look for it for you all. There's somewhere where you can find every single possible attribute, and I will find that and I'll link that to you all. So basically we're gonna add some attributes here. So as an example, I'm gonna search for tweets with the word COVID in it. I want all of my tweets to have minimum number of likes. I want to collect the number of tweets as well. I'm going to limit it to 100 tweets for now. I'm going to store it as a CSV, and that is my CSV. So if I run this cell, it's actually going to do, oh, sorry. If I run the next cell, when I do the search function, this is when it's actually going to start collecting my tweets. So just like that, I have 100 tweets. So Twint actually works really, really quickly, but I'm going to talk about some limitations in a bit. So just really, yeah.
Quick question with that. Is that the 100 most common, or sorry, the most recent tweets?
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to bring up. It is the 100 most recent tweets. So you have to get creative with how you want to filter through these tweets, because the way that Twint works is it's scraping Twitter. And the way that you scrape, or the way that Twitter comes up, I actually haven't used Twitter in years, so I don't know exactly how it is, but I believe it's pretty much, it's mostly chronological with some exceptions of like very, very popular tweets, I think. So that is how the tweets are getting to you. So if you do it by like number of likes, there's also a parameter that you can do like since a certain date, that will help you limit the noise in your tweet. But I'm actually going to run this CSV right now and turn it into a pandas data frame real quick. Actually, let's just do this. From here, you actually get all of this information. These IDs don't matter. These are, I think, when the tweets were tweeted. And you can see this is very, very recent. This is literally like, what, 7 minutes ago. Here you can also see their usernames, time zones. I guess you can filter by that, whether it's retweeted, whether there are transcripts, so on and so forth. So let me actually do it to maybe one, I don't know, do tweets get 5,000 likes? I'm not even sure. Let's just see if we can get more meaningful tweets. All right, let's take a look. Okay, oh, so you see we have like NPR here. I know they're a source, Stephen King as well. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure what each of these are, but this is something that you can use to filter.
Another question on that. Sorry to keep interrupting you.
No worries.
I see geo there. Is that like for geo source? So does Twint get geo information, or is that just like?
I think Twint gets whatever Twitter has. So if a tweet has your geo data with it, then Twint will get it, I think. If your tweet doesn't have the geo data, then it won't get it. I believe because it is scraping Twitter in the back end, I think it's just whatever the tweet has, it will return.
Okay, so if it does have it, oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure nowadays like how many people geotag their tweets. So yeah.
What are the number of rows that are, columns that are there?
So these are all the columns. When it was created, date, time, time zone, user ID, username, name, place. Let's actually take a look at like a head. There we go. Well, we're not going to have all of these. So it looks like if you have like retweets, if it comes from a specific source, I don't know. But yeah, I don't use most of these columns because I mostly use this for NLP analysis. So actually the only thing I take out of this is the tweet column, I believe. And here I have all of my tweets.
Yes, can you, hello, by the way.
Hi.
Can you control the columns that you pull?
Yes, there is a way to do that. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's in the documentation somewhere. I've definitely done that before. If that doesn't work now, I'm not sure. Just because I will say Twitter has gone through a lot of changes since the start of the year.
So now when we are doing web scraping, it's like any web the page can be scraped, or is like there are some specifications where, right, somebody says that I'm not permitting you to scrape my web page. So, and like, how do we know that? Because there somewhere down the line, like where in privacy policy where nobody reads, they
Yeah.
might have written that.
Yeah.
In that case, what happens?
I think because of that, I recommend doing APIs over web scraping, just because an API is something that either the company has created or other sources have created, and the fact that they aren't taken down mean that they are okay with like the data privacy ownership stuff. In terms of web scraping, what can be scraped? Pretty much anything. Oh, with the means that we are aware of, which is Beautiful Soup, which I'll talk about later. And this, by the way, is not exactly web scraping. This is using a Python library to get data. Web scraping would be using Beautiful Soup, and we are able to scrape with the skills that we have. We're able to scrape anything that has the data in HTML. And I'll get into that a little bit later, because these first few examples are like more API examples, and our next, towards the end, we'll talk about more like web scrape examples. But yeah, the data has to be in HTML format in order for us to be able to scrape it. There are other libraries and ways to scrape. For example, if you have like a table that needs to be like refreshed, or you need to like scroll down in order to load more rows of data, for example, that becomes harder to scrape. And so there are other libraries that I unfortunately am not as familiar with, but I will send out resources if needed. There's a library called Selenium that does that, where you can like scroll and you can basically like control your mouse and keyboard to scrape specific data on a screen. There's also one called Scrapey or Scrapey, basically scrape instead of an E, it's a Y for Python. Yeah, those are other ways that you can scrape. I'm less familiar with those. Beautiful Soup, basically anything that is in HTML, we can scrape. As long as you can hover over something, inspect it. What's an example? Let's see. Let's see if Canvas can be scraped. So let's say I hover over this, I inspect it. Yeah, as long as it shows up in HTML, we can scrape it.
And one quick question. So now, like the website like Coursera or Udemy, I'm looking into industry. These are the this thing I have shortlisted, but like I'm thought about any project. So if let's say an hospital chain, or maybe Coursera or Udemy, where it's related to education, online education, right? If I want to scrap, web scrape those websites, right? Am I allowed? That's
I think,
if it is email, then it should be.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's allowed or not is a harder question for me to answer. I don't know what specific websites allow their data for like public use versus not. I would say if you're like, for example, if you want to scrape like Coursera catalog, like all of their classes, I don't think scraping their like titles of their classes will be an issue. If you scrape the content, I can see how that might be a problem. But if you're just scraping like the classes, like the title of the class, maybe like, I don't know, other things like how it's rated, how many people have taken it, I think that's fine. But as long as you're not taking their like proprietary content, I think that's okay. But I think if it's specific examples, we can talk about it at 101s for sure. If any of you are like unsure about the ethical implications of scraping specific data off of specific websites, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, so this is how you use Twint. I wanted to talk about some of the limitations. So one big limitation, as Edward, you had kind of brought up, is that it is biased to more recent tweets. And so because of that, you have to get more creative with how you want to subset these tweets. So it kind of depends if you are doing something that you want to be spread over time evenly. So for example, one of the past projects that I had was looking at COVID tweets relating to COVID cases. And so if you're looking at COVID tweets versus COVID cases, you want to kind of measure the tweets at the start of COVID, but this student was not getting as much data on, a year ago versus now. And so you have to get creative with like different search terms or different ways of filtering to just get data that was more evenly spread out. So do keep that in mind. I also believe that there is a language filter. I think that there's like an attribute that you can do like language. That filter is currently broken from what I've seen in like my last group of students. But yeah, I think that's not too bad because you also have the language column here that you can just filter out. A bit annoying, but that's just something to be aware of.
A question on Twint again. So is there like, do they delete after a certain amount of tweets? Like, is there like a limit? Could I go back to 2010 and get all the tweets with certain words, in it?
Oh, that I'm not 100% sure. I do think it is dependent on Twitter. So I think one way you can try or test that out is see if when you search for something on Twitter, whether it shows you those tweets from that far back. It will give you the more recent ones first, so it's going to keep giving you more and more recent tweets. But maybe you come up with like a more, like a stronger filter on that. I don't know what the limit is. I've had students who did like 20,000 tweets in a single poll. So maybe you just do more polls of tweets to get data from further back. Yeah, I don't know if there is an actual limit, probably somewhere in the documentation, but
in one of the, I think Capstone project, this was the like question where what the student did is like he pulled a lot of data and then he filtered it date wise and just picked up the earliest dates. That's
yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably what you do. Because I think even here, well, because, okay, let's make the minimum likes. I don't even know what do people get 20,000 likes? Is that a lot? I don't even know. All right, so let's see. We're already going back a few days here. So all right, let's go with like 70,000 likes and let's just see how far back we go. The 70,000 likes looks like we go back to the start of the year. Okay. I guess if I make this limit higher, like 1,000, it would go further and further back. Out of curiosity, do tweets get that many likes? Okay, that's what I thought. I'm not as familiar with Twitter myself, but there are ways to play around the filter. So yeah, 100,000 likes, we still go back to November of last year. And this is only the top 100 most recent tweets. So I think just playing around with some of these numbers, some other filters, you might be able to get as far back as you need to, maybe, I don't know. 2010 sounds a bit far back, but I'm not 100% sure. I think you could try. Cool. Any other questions regarding Twint? Twint is great because you don't need to create an account. You don't need API keys or anything, just the configuration. And then you immediately, these actually get saved as CSV files really quickly. So if I pull up my Jupyter screen, you'll see that I have CSV files of COVID tweets. Let me just put this here so y'all can see COVID tweets immediately as a CSV for you to use in as many notebooks as you want. So that's awesome. All right, so the next API I'm going to talk about is Spotify's API. Spotify is a really, really robust API. It's they have a lot of developers working on their API that I'm aware of. The only downside is you have to create like an account and get your credentials. This is more of a traditional API, I will say. So let's just talk through it and see how it works. So for Spotify, Spotify also has a Python wrapper called Spotipy. But with Spotipy, you still have to register for an account with Spotify so that Spotipy can use your credentials. That doesn't make sense. Feel free to just use my code. But anyways, on Spotify for developers, you got to make an account and then create an app. So the way that you do it, let's see, if you go to your dashboard, oops, I logged out. Okay, let me log in real quick. Oh, here we go. All right, so if we go to your dashboard, you can create a new app. And when you do that, you will be given a client ID and a client secret. And then you copy and paste, enter a config file. I'll talk about config file in a little bit. And then you have to save that somewhere so that you can import it. So I've saved it somewhere, imported that. I'm also importing all of these. You actually don't need sys, I think. Yeah, you don't really need that one, but you're going to import Spotipy, and then Spotipy on their documentation basically tells you to do this. This basically manages your credentials for you. So from here, I am basically putting in my ID and my secret. I'm not going to show it to you because it has my other passwords on the same file, but it's basically this copy and pasted into a dictionary in a Python file. And I'll walk through an example of how I do that in a little bit. But cool. Once this is all set up, I run this code and I'm connected to the Spotipy API, and then we can sort of see some things here. So something that, just to show that it works, I'm going to show you all that. Okay, yeah, I'll run this code. So this is actually my Spotipy ID. I use Spotipy, so therefore I have an ID. This is just an example to show how it works. Basically, anything that you want to find from the Spotipy API, Spotipy makes it really easy to use because all you have to do is do sp dot something. So sp dot something, in this case, I'm just trying to get all of my user playlists. This is my user number. It's public information, so it's fine to have it here. But if I run this, what I'm doing here is I'm doing a for loop to just get all of my playlist tracks. Let's see what's in here. Yeah, so these are all the songs on my more recent playlist, basically. And all the song information is there. So I basically get like track number. I don't even know what song this is. I don't know what this is, but you can see that I have name of the song, artist of the song, all sorts of information. And then from these other IDs, you can get like even more info. So this is just an example to show that this works. Something that might be more relevant to you all is using Spotipy to search up just a bunch of songs to create a data set. So I actually wrote this really simple function, which feel free to use. It's going to just search for an artist and a track. And if you actually look at the Spotipy documentation, it tells you how to format everything. But if you want to search for songs by a certain artist or a track, I'm just doing an F string here, where you search a query, and then you have 3 songs, or limit to how many search results you want. So this is the function I defined. This is just what I'm searching for. I think she just won a Grammy yesterday, so here's the search that we're going to do. And here I have, I think, 3 of her songs based on this search term. So I have 3 songs just like that, and you saw how fast it worked. Other things that you can do, basically the query, how it works is, it looks at what category you're looking up. So here, so previously I looked up artist and track, and you can actually add as many of these as you want. And then your actual search term. It just has to be separated by spaces, which is very, very user-friendly, I think. So in this example, I'm just going to search for just 10 pop songs. Maybe you're creating a data set to just have different genres of music. This is an example. If I do the search, you can see here I have 10 pop songs. I think this is a super popular song right now. I think this is still the same song. Yeah. Here are your search results.
Yes. Question.
Yeah.
Is this able, and I'm not sure, honestly, like maybe it's just a fundamental way that APIs do or don't work. I don't know, but is this, are we able to use this if I wanted to, let's say, get like real-time updates on, just as an example, like I want to know what Yish is listening to today. So can I use this API to like get like an updated daily list of what you're listening to?
I don't know. I have no idea. I think it depends on what methods that it has. So as an example, let's see. These are all of the things that you can get. Oh, look, current playback, current user playback. looks like you can. I don't know if this is the exact thing that you want. Let's see what else there is. There is current user recently played. So apparently you can see what I've recently played.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So then like if a person then, because I guess there was two reasons why I asked the question. Was one was because I wanted to know that answer, but the second thing was our API, is there a limit to how much or how much we can use an API for free without, because I imagine the amount that we might pull from it, or the the rate at which we do it, like how do you how do we know the limit for that?
Yes, there is a limit. So it depends on what it is, that there are different kinds of limits. So I know that if you want to search for, let me see, I know that this one, track ID. So here you can see audio features. You can only get 100 at a time, 100 in a single API call. There are other limits as well. I forget what the Spotify API limit. So let's see. So what does it say? Yeah, so I don't think it says exactly how much, but it depends on the API. I'm not sure for Spotify specifically. Some APIs limit to a number of API hits per day. Some limit by the hour, some by the minute as well. I'm honestly not sure what it is. I think it is, what is it? 3,200. I don't know what this is. It's just a page I pulled up, but every API has limits for sure.
Gotcha. So then one other question I had is, so am I correct to assume that to a degree it depends on how we code in terms of how frequently we do it and the amount, of course, but I guess I'm just thinking about, like, if you set up something that was like kind of productionized or just it was just kind of live, like the code would dictate like how frequently and how often and everything.
Yeah. So in production, I'm sorry, I'm going to mute you because there's a bit of feedback. But anyways, in production, usually APIs have some sort of some premium plans available, such that in production, your rate limits is a lot higher, or maybe even unlimited. So I've worked at places where, for example, you use an API, and because it's going to be used by like tens of thousands of people at once, they pay for a subscription to the API. And so that's how it controls. And most of the time, there are free tiers, and you'll actually, I'm sure some of you might come across some APIs while thinking of capstone ideas that they want you to pay for it. I will say for this project, please don't pay for anything you don't really, really want to. But yeah, there are definitely like tiers of like, what's it, membership for data usage for sure.
Does Google have their own API where, I mean, within the search engine, if you want to have like what was the most searched thing, or if you want to find something viral?
I have no idea. I don't know. I think that is something that you should look up. Yeah.
I think actually Google Analytics, might be something you might be interested for that, Kishore.
Yeah, I'll look up. Thanks, Edward.
Cool.
Analytics.
Yeah, Google Analytics. I don't know. I've never used it before. I have no idea. Cool. Any questions about Spotify's API, or specifically Spotipy? Yeah, I will say Spotipy is very, very user friendly. I actually, if you all remember, I think like months ago, I used their API to like transfer a bunch of music from like Google Play Music onto here. So it actually has a functionality to like create playlists through Python. It can delete playlists as well if you just have like a bunch of playlists that you want to get rid of. And yeah, a lot of functionality. You can get a lot of artist information, song information. It has all these audio features. Like for every song, they have their own measures of like how instrumental is the song, how acoustic is it, how danceable is it. That's actually a metric that they have as well. So I like their API a lot. I think it's very, very user friendly, and Spotipy makes it even more user friendly. Cool. Well, the next one I want to talk about is Reddit. Any questions before I move on? All right, so Reddit, with the Reddit API, they have their own API similar to Spotify. I found a Python wrapper for it. It's called PRAW, which stands for Python Reddit API wrapper. And I've linked their API here. I only found this out over the weekend. Thanks, Edward, for pointing this one out to me. I actually did a Reddit project before, but I ended up just using a data set. But knowing this, I can scrape it for myself. And so for this, kind of a similar process, just that the signing up is a little bit trickier. So I actually did this earlier today. You have to have a Reddit account. And then you go onto this website, /prefs/apps, and you're prompted to create an application here. So what you got to do here is create your name. What you're going to use is script, because the rest of these, they have a lot of different limitations, and you're going to need more authorization to access those. So I recommend that you use script. Give it some description because they need you to. About URL doesn't need to have anything. And for redirect URL, this one is one that I actually looked up over the weekend. Redirect URL or URI specific, I should say, use your local host. This is something that I Googled and it worked for a bunch of people. I'm not 100% sure why this is. Oh, actually, I kind of do know. So basically in the Reddit API, if you want to use something that is user specific, so let's say you want to use their API to like create a Reddit bot and like, for example, I don't know, make a bunch of comments on posts. You can actually create a bot that does that. I've seen those on Reddit. To authorize your account, you need this redirect URI. And that basically prompts you to log into your Reddit account. Basically, if you've ever seen like a pop-up window where they have you sign into like Google or Facebook, that's what it does. And when you finish signing it, it brings you back to this URI. I only know this because I did a similar process with Spotify, but that's what that is for. So if you put it as your local host, because you probably won't need it to redirect you anywhere else for this project, feel free to use that as your URI. And it seems to have worked for most people. I've seen on Stack Overflow.
One quick question. So now every time when we are, let's say, running the notebook, right, the data will keep changing, right? Because
yes,
we are going to run the API every time.
Well, it kind of depends on like what your search query is. So for example, the Twint one, yeah, the Twint one's going to change every time because Twitter keeps updating. For the Spotify one, if I'm searching like a specific artist song, it's going to be the same every time, most likely. For the Reddit, depends on your search as well. I haven't explored too much of the Reddit API because I just only looked at it yesterday. But with the Reddit API, I think that it does depend on what exactly you're searching up. If you're searching up something that like, let's say you're looking at like the top posts from like a very specific subreddit that doesn't change, then it shouldn't change. But it's very dependent on like the website itself.
Would we be able to, like, let's say I want to look at the top posts for today, yesterday, and the day before for a certain subreddit?
I'm not sure. I think that's something that you would consult the documentation for. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Basically, what I know about the Reddit API is what I read on like the front page of their documentation, honestly. So I don't know. Let's see. I know that it is in the model, the submission. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, honestly. This is something that I haven't had too much with. So I don't think they have anything on like time. Oh, I guess time the subreddit was, but that's the whole subreddit. So let's see. Subreddit time. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I think I'd have, you would have to do a lot of exploring on the API to figure out if that's something that you can get. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So with the Reddit API, after you create that app, they give you a bunch of stuff. So they give you this number here and this number here, which I've copied and pasted. You also need your Reddit username and your Reddit password, which is what I'm not going to show you all, but I have them here. And then for some reason, you also need this user agent thing, but test as a string seems to work. So if I import these and I instantiate this, and it does it in this very, very similar way as Spotipy did it, instantiate that. This is actually the example from their documentation. So you can see here the object is called Reddit. Here is for submission in Reddit.subreddit learnpython.hot limit 10. That's saying that, all right, we're going to use our Reddit instantiated object, look up subreddit, look at the subreddit learn Python and get the top 10 hottest posts, and then print the title of it. And that's going to run. And basically we have here some of this pretty familiar. You can see that people are looking to scrape using Beautiful Soup, which is what we're going to do in a little bit. Arrays, but yeah, these are, I guess, the titles of the top 10 hot posts on Reddit under the Learn Python subreddit. This took me a little bit to figure out, but basically each of these are, where did I open this? Here. All right, so each of these things are a submission. And then you see here where I did, oh wait, here where I did dot title. Dot title is an attribute of the submission. And so I linked this page right here so that you have that. These are all of the things that you can get from a submission. So you can see here, you got the title, you can get the URL, you can get which subreddit it is, you can get the text, you can get, I don't know, ID, when it was edited, if it was edited, the name, author, so on and so forth. So as another example, oh, this is another example. You can see that if I just do this, so this is basically the same thing. I'm looking at Pun Patrol, but I'm not printing the title. If I do this, you can see here what I have is a bunch of submission objects. So the submission objects each have all of those attributes that I was naming earlier. So if I do like a similar search for the subreddit news, and I save the data of, let's say I just want to have the ID, title, URL, the score, put that into data. Those are the attributes that I will keep, and I have them in a data frame right here. So this is just 20 of the top posts in the news subreddit, and I have all that information here. Questions? Cool. Before we move on to web scraping, I want to say that every API is different, and it's really up to you to figure out whether you can get the data that you want. I'm only familiar with the APIs that I've used and I've explored, and I will say that I learned the most through going to documentation, through like thinking, okay, what data do I really need? Can I finesse this code to work based on documentation to get what I want? There are definitely limitations. You can only get what the API allows you to get. Of course, not all the data is publicly available as it shouldn't be. So yeah, if you have any questions about that or you run into roadblocks, feel free to just let me know. All right, that took longer than I expected. So hopefully the web scraping part should be a little quicker. But with web scraping, we're gonna recap a couple things and a couple new things as well. So with web scraping, I have two examples. First, I have Craigslist, and then I have board games. I'm actually going to start with Craigslist because I think that's a little bit easier. So here, let's just take a look at this URL just as an example as something that I want to scrape. Oops, this is not in quotes. All right. So this is just New York apartments for rent, I'm guessing. Let's just say I want to do a project on this and scrape all of this information. So out of this, what do I want? Let's just say I want the title, I want the price, maybe I want the URL. do I want the URL? Let me see what my code has. Oh, the neighborhood. I could get the URL if I wanted to as well. So when we're scraping this, what do we do first? I think an easy first step is to see if it can be scraped. So whether something can be scraped, just right click, inspect. On different browsers, it's slightly different, but I think every browser has some sort of inspect tool. If anyone uses a different browser and knows it, feel free to share. But basically, if I'm doing inspect on Google Chrome, this little button in the top right lets you like hover over specific things. So for example, here you can see that, all right, let's say I want, what's this, East Hampton. If I hover over there, I can see that I can actually get the word East Hampton, which is great. Because that's information that I want. And this is information that I can scrape. So one thing that you could do is just look at where East Hampton is. East Hampton is in result-hood. So this is a class that you're going to look up to get East Hampton. So one thing to always remember with web scraping is scope each row. And what I mean by that is I highly, highly recommend that if you have a page like this with multiple results, get each result as its own HTML first. So what I mean by that is I could go in and get all the neighborhoods for all of these because each of these neighborhoods is under this class result-hood. If I do that, I'm going to have a list of what, 120 neighborhoods, right? I can do the same thing and I can get 120 titles and then I can just zip them together and I have my data set, right? Now, what if something is missing? What if there is no neighborhood in one of these listings? For example, yeah, this one doesn't have a neighborhood. What am I going to do then? If I do the scrape that way, and if I try to zip it together, it's going to, one, see a shape mismatch. Two, you're not going to know which one was missing. It's very, very hard to go back and figure out which one was missing. So I highly recommend for web scraping, especially on something that has multiple results on a page, go big to small. What I mean by that is look for an element that encompasses everything that you want. So in this case, I want to get all of this information, I think. Yeah, do I want all of this information? Let's double check. I have this code that I already tested. So it says I want result row. Okay. So result row is this. All right. So I want all of this information. So you can see that within this result row, sorry, I know it looks small on your screens probably. But all right, in this result row, I have all of this information here. I have this image, I'm guessing. I have the result info that has like the icon star. It has the result date, heading. Let's see what else is in here. I have the title. I have the result hood, the price. So everything I want for a single row of data exists in result row. Now, Reddit was nice to call it something nice like result row to make it easy to find. Not every website is like that. So do keep that in mind. Sometimes it's a little hard to figure out where exactly you should scope down. So maybe if I know that I don't want everything that's out here, maybe I want everything that is in result info. That really depends on what data you want. But let's start with result row because that's what my code has. So if I know that I have multiple row, like in my ideal data frame, I have multiple rows appearing on this one page. What you first do is you want to start with a find all. So that's what I'm doing here. And to instantiate beautiful soup is just like this. So we've been through these steps before, copy and paste. This I feel like is just code. So you have your URL and then use beautiful soup to get the URL and get the .text. That basically gets all your elements. So let me just show you all what soup looks like. Soup is the entire HTML for that entire page. And with this soup, you can actually look up specific things. That's where I'm using the find all here. And how find all works, there are different formats to do find all, but I think this is one of the easier ones. So because I know I want result row, I'm going to search it this way. Result row is a list object, and then I'm looking for the class with the name result row. So I just use this information to look it up.
Just one quick question. Now, let's say when we do soup and we the data, afterwards we just convert into a data frame, and then from the data frame, if we just depending on what we are, because like the viewing becomes easier than like when we are scraping this way.
Yeah, I think sometimes, so once I do recommend that you clean the data before putting it into a data frame, because it's harder to clean HTML data when it's already in a data frame. So I'll actually go through that process in this as well.
Right.
But yeah, you technically can do that, like put the entire soup in a data frame and then break it out, but it's a lot harder to work with that way. So yeah, so this is the entire soup. And what I'm doing here is I'm doing a find all. So with a find all, it's going to return as a list everything that matches this class result row. So let me just replace this here just so we can see. So this is everything that is within a class result row. It's actually a list. So if we take a look at the length of this, the length of this is 120, which is great. If we take a look at the first element, this might look kind of familiar. This is our East Hampton. So we have our East Hampton 1500. What else did I want? Oh, I think the title is here. I think this is the title, Mid-Century Modern in the Springs. So all of this information is here. And I know that all of the information for a single row in my data frame is in this one element of this list, which will make it very easy to extract into the same row. So with this, to extract the specific information, all I have to do is loop through the mini soups. So I don't know what the specific name of these things are, but I call each of these like the mini soups, because each row of data is contained within a mini soup. That's not a technical term. I don't know what it's called, but yeah. So all I have to do is just loop over all of the mini soups. And I do that. I'm doing that here with a bunch of list comprehensions. This is an example here. I'm getting the titles, all of the prices, and all the neighborhoods. Now that I'm looking at this code, this is not the best way to do it, because here you can see I'm separating them out again. So let's actually take a look at what this gives us. We have all of the titles and prices here. So let's take a look at titles. Great, titles are here. Let's check the length just to make sure we don't run into problems. 120. The length of the prices also 120. That is a good sign. So here we have prices as well. And then neighborhoods. I think neighborhoods, I ran into some issues with them being none type. So I have that there. So I have that as well. And after I have all of that cleaned, then I put them into a data frame. Like that. If you want cleaner scraping code, I should have double checked this before I put this up here, but better scraping code is in our web scraping notebook from many, many months ago. So that is there. It's a more, it's done in a cleaner loop for sure.
Hey, cool. I have a question. So you said with Beautiful Soup, you're allowed to scrape, has to be public, correct? So, and I'm assuming anything that doesn't, or, well, yes, anything that doesn't require like a login so you could view the information would be considered public?
That is correct. If you need to log into something to view that information, likely you wouldn't be able to get that soup. Yeah. Which actually, since that is here, if you do need to log in to get a soup of something, Selenium would be a way to go about it. What Selenium does is, Selenium allows you to first log into whatever the web page is, and then it actually scrapes from your browser. And then you can actually use Beautiful Soup on what Selenium finds. I personally haven't used Selenium. I also do think that if you need Selenium, it's likely that your data shouldn't be scraped, but I mean, it does vary case by case, but we can talk about specifics in our 101s.
Selenium is pretty good for making like bots to purchase stuff.
Ah, nice. I've heard of that as well. I used to like buy and sell like Adidas shoes when I was in college, and I used Selenium a little bit for that, but not for data science. I haven't thought about how it translates to data science yet. Cool. All right, we are almost at time. So honestly, this example on board games, on scraping board games, is very, very similar. So I'm not going to go through it all. The only thing that I want to spend the rest of the time talking about is if you come across XML formatting. XML formatting is basically the old JSON. So a really, really quick example. Let's just run through this super quickly so I can talk about it. This is what I'm scraping. I always forget to not copy the quotes. Okay, so I'm just pasting the API or I'm scraping the API output. So that's why this looks like this. But basically, this XML is old JSON. JSON, which is the dictionary format that we're very used to, was only introduced, I don't remember when, but XML was what preceded it. So some older websites are actually in XML format, which actually looks very, very similar to HTML format. I just want to talk about some of the specifics as to how to interact with XML data. So I have this information. Let's just say I want to get specific parts of it. So let's say I have a game here, and I want to get the names of it as an example. These are all of the specific kinds of names of the game. So basically, I guess this is like the game Samurai. I don't know what this is, but this is a board game Samurai, and it has alternate names in different languages. And let's just say I want to get each of these names out. How do these work? So with names, let's just take a look at the first one. So this, oops, I meant to look at this. I'm actually curious as to what the type comes out as. Oh, cool. It's a beautiful soup element kind, but basically XML format. So let's say I want to pick out specific parts of this. How do I do that? So this actually works kind of like a dictionary. So for example, if I want to pull out like primary, I can index lookup type to get primary. If I want to look up value, that works like that. So that's one thing. Another example is description. And so I have this here as well. And these are just like little things with XML, just in case you come across it. Oops, let me do this real quick. So this is the description of the game. And what's kind of annoying is you see it has these like open and close tags that will kind of mess up. It'll just not look nice in your data frame. You definitely will want to clean that up. You might end up using regex, but as long as it's still in this XML or beautiful soup format, remember that you can always do .text to clean it up. Again, you have all of these like annoying like ampersand like symbols. Now that one, there's no easy way to get around this. This is something that you will have to end up using regex or other Python methods to clean up. But the main thing I wanted to get out of this is working with XML formats. Just anything with like the triangle brackets. I just wanted to point out how you can access that information similar to a dictionary because it was a predecessor of JSON formats. Cool. Before I take questions, on Thursday, what I'm going to go through is creating databases. I know a lot of you are still thinking of your ideas, but as you know, a lot of like data science jobs want SQL as like a job requirement. And so you can actually incorporate that into your project depending on what your data is like. As long as you have data in table formats, you can consider putting your data in a SQL table. And on Thursday, what I'm going to walk through is how to do that an easy way and how you can do that using AWS. So if you're interested in doing that, that's all I'll be talking about on Thursday. Cool. Any questions at this point?
Yes. So back to the whole Reddit thing.
Yeah.
I saw that there was like a limit on comments. I think it's like the top 5 comments for every post or something like that.
Okay.
hypothetically speaking, if we're, running the API or running to look up more information on the API, what are the chances that they'll actually like ban you if you do it too many times?
So I have had students hit API limits before. Usually what will happen is they just stop, you just hit the limit and then you're fine. You just have to like wait a day and then you can keep getting more data. So that's one thing that can happen. Two, I've seen it. Yeah, so I used to teach at WeWork, and basically the student got everyone off of the, so it depends. Sometimes they track it based on your client ID or whatever like your credentials are. Sometimes they track it by IP address, so be careful about that one. Because what happened was, I remember this is with the Yelp API. I have a student that got the whole of WeWork's IP address banned from the Yelp API for like 2 months. So be careful about that. Ways around that, if it's the client ID thing, you can make a new app and it'll work fine. I actually have a couple of students that have made like multiple apps on the same API to get more data. Reddit, I'm not too sure how they do it. You could either try that, or what I've had some students do, they just go to like different Starbucks and then just go to each Starbucks or each cafe and use their IP address to get more data.
Well, I think
Those
a lot
are,
of
yeah.
a lot of privacy browsers have masking APIs or different APIs. Like
That's true. I've heard that APIs might not work if you have a VPN. I don't know if that's similar, but
Yeah,
I've heard that like I know that Spotify doesn't work with a VPN. What's another one? I can't think of another, but I have had students that have told me that it doesn't work with a VPN. But I think it really does depend on the API itself and like what technologies they're using to set up their API, because there are technologies that you can use to set up APIs, and if people use the same ones, they probably have the same restrictions. So it really depends. I don't know what API has what restrictions, but I feel like if you look it up, people are always trying to get data. So I'm sure you'll find like Stack Overflows of people talking about this stuff.
Where would be a good place to people trying to get data? Where would be a good like message board or just sort of source, like where can I find this type of data, see if it's even available?
Let's see. I've linked a list of APIs. That's not really a message board. That's more just like a list of APIs. That is in the Capstone guidelines. A list of APIs over here. These are all public APIs that definitely are easy to get data from. They're organized based on category. I perused this when I was trying to think of my capstone as well. I think this is a good one to start. In terms of message boards, I don't know. I personally am not a big message board person, but I imagine, Reddit has a couple subreddits actually of like data sets. I cannot name them right now. I'm not like a big Reddit user, so I don't know for sure, but yeah, I'm sure if you do like a search of like data sets for data science projects, some might come up. Or if you ask me if like there's like a specific industry or kind of data that you're looking for, my like bank of sources is based off of past student projects. So that means that those have worked in the past. So feel free to let me know. Cool. Anything else? All right, so we're at time. Anything else you all need, feel free to Slack me. I will see you all back here on Thursday and we'll talk about SQL databases. All right, have a good evening, everybody. Bye.